Okay, what's up, everyone? Here I'm be gonna be doing a reaction slash reply, kind of a little bit of a kind of discussion about Pokemon Champions, which was announced on Pokemon Day of this past year. It was announced on February 26th, 2025, and so far, what we know of this game is it's going to be kind of cross-platform between phones and Nintendo Switch slash Switch 2. And it is going to be a battle simulator with the gimmicks that we know of. Theoretically, we've seen both Mega Evolution and Terrestrialization. We might see Dynamax, we might see Z moves. We really don't know anything about this game other than we are going to be able to transfer Pokemon from Pokemon Home and Scarlet and Violet into Pokemon Champions. But Ruffeled Rowlit here has a video I find really interesting.
How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Rowlit, and today I want to talk about why I think Pokemon Champions may have a massive impact on the Pokemon franchise and the Pokemon mainline games going forward. So, sit back and relax.
This I actually do agree with, and I do think that this is possibly a really, really good positive. Hear me out here. I think with Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Legends ZA, they're definitely much more focused on the single-player experience, and I think that that's actually kind of a good thing. Pokemon has been really known, and really a big reason for its longevity is the competitive scene, yes, but they also kind of lose out on the kind of casual side where people want to focus on the story, focus on the setting, and the gameplay. The gameplay, in a way, and many people will tell you this is the reason why Pokemon Legends Arceus was such a breath of absolute fresh air. It was a change in the system. And not just that, like, being able to freely throw your Pokeballs at a Pokemon without having to battle it was fucking amazing. Like, to this day, the game feels so fucking good to play. But, and having them focus more on that, on the single-player side of things with their main games, to me would be an actual, like, full-on positive. However, at the same time, you're kind of, it would have to have one thing with her to improve the other. They're kind of like diametrically opposed, so to say. It's a spectrum. It's a balancing act. But introducing Pokemon Champions, which focuses solely on that competitive aspect, they could actually focus much more on one side without having to have the other with her. It's a genius move on Game Freak, on the Pokemon Company's part. It's an absolutely genius move, and I do think Pokemon Champions will be here to stay. And it's going to last. It's going to be like Pokemon Go. But let's hear what he has to say.
So Pokemon Champions was officially revealed on the Pokemon Day 2025, so earlier this year as of me recording this video. But there is a big reason why I want to talk about this game, which is I think it may drastically change how Pokemon games work going forward. So, first of all, before we talk about why it may change Pokemon forever, what even is Pokemon Champions? Well, it is a dedicated PvP Pokemon game. It's essentially going to be where you go to do competitive battling. Think a combination of Pokemon Showdown, which is a fan-made website, alongside Pokemon Stadium. It's basically a fusion of those two things into one, taking the competitive aspect of the Pokemon mainline games. I mean, if you've ever done any sort of competitive battling or VGC or Wi-Fi battling, as it was called back in the day, then you will remember that we specifically had only that as our only way to battle other players around the world. And it's been the biggest and main way for Pokemon competitive battling alongside the TCG for anybody that's into the competitive side of Pokemon. And even from the trailer, we've already seen that a lot of mechanics will be present. I'm talking Mega Evolution, potential hints to Z moves. Also, I think they even referenced Dynamaxing possibly being in there, given the size of the arena and everything. Like, there is definitely stuff that's going to be really interesting about Pokemon, well, Champions, that isn't present in other Pokemon games, which is all of the freaking battle mechanics, everything in one place. Because keep in mind, when a new generation comes out, when a new mainline game comes out, usually you only get about one new feature, and sometimes maybe an old feature is included. An example of this is Pokemon Sun and Moon. In Sun and Moon, we still had Mega Evolutions, just not any new ones, old ones mainly, but we still had Megas, and we also had the introduction of Z moves. So you had two features. But then, once we moved into Generation 8, guess what? They removed it. They removed Megas, they removed Z moves, and the only thing we had was Dynamax and Z.
And this is actually one of the things, like, if they were to add all the different battle mechanics, I do think that he tackles later in this video the idea of balancing, and this is one of the main reasons why we don't have a national dex, at least in my personal thoughts. My personal theory is it's the reason why we don't have a national dex in the mainline games anymore. It's because of the factor, not just in terms of like a world building sense, which even in that sense, it makes sense that not every Pokemon will be available everywhere. And like now we kind of like even in terms of like societal like law sense, some Pokemon just would not be in certain regions. Like, I can tell you, based on Tinkaton's Pokedex entry, it wouldn't be in the fucking Galar region. Like, the Galar region, they have Corviknight as, like, taxis. Do you know what fucking Tinkaton does? It starts fucking chucking rocks and shit at Corviknight trying to knock him down. You honestly think, like, an industry such as, like, the Corviknight taxi industry would exist in Galar if Tinkaton was there? Fuck no, it wouldn't. Like, you have to take stuff like that into consideration. This is actually one of the reasons why I love the Pokedex. The Pokedex is not only a good, like, incentive to like have the player keep going in order to complete the Pokedex and like collect every Pokemon. It's also a really good writing tool. It's a really good source of world building. It's a really cool like it's a bit of a literary like lexicon like device in which you can explore, you know, the world. You can explore the world building and how a Pokemon's ecology works. It's fantastic. It's like it's one of those things. As I have gotten into writing, it's something that I've actually appreciated a lot more as I've come to appreciate writing, and especially in games. I think a lot of people kind of take the Pokedex and what it is for granted.
Same thing happened with Terastallization in Gen 9. So my point is, that usually features get added and eventually removed, but with Pokemon Champions, that would not be an issue. Everything would be in one single place, which is what would make this game probably the best place to go if you're a competitive battler. Now, the thing that worries a lot of people, including myself, about Pokemon Champions is that most likely this is going to be a live service game. Simple explanation for that. A live service game is something like, let's say, Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Valorant, really any game that is mainly played online, like you have to have an internet connection, and the game is constantly added to. There's usually no story, it's mostly about PvP and things along that nature. Like, games that are live service have become more prevalent, and the main reason is, of course, money. Because with live service games, you are constantly paying, you are constantly spending money, and it's not like a regular game that you just buy once, play forever. No, this is a game that you would constantly have to invest time into, constantly pay money, that's generally how live service games work or operate. Again, there's a better explanation for it, but I'm giving you the TLDR. So there are aspects, of course, that could work really well. For example, you could rotate gimmicks if this was a live service game. Every single, freaking month, they could change what gimmick is going to be included. So one month they could be like, hey, this month we're going to be changing things up. It's a new season, so we're going to be adding in megas now. So you're going to have a brand new megas, and then next season they could change it and they could add in instead like terrestrialization and whatever the next one is in Gen 10. Basically, there are elements of a live service game that can work really well for something like this, but there are caveats. And one of those caveats, of course, is the lack of Pokemon, right? The game is probably not going to launch with every single Pokemon included, which is to be expected. But the question then becomes...
This, I think, while it's sometimes seen as a detriment, and sometimes because of the factor, like, I believe one person made a video talking, like, their support over Dexit, which was that, the national Dex break. And he was saying that Pokemon, over the course of the series, like, by introducing so many different playable creatures, became a logistical nightmare. He was correct. Like, absolutely. We now have over 1,000 Pokemon. I think as of right now, like, and I think this even excludes forms. It's including forms. It's over 1,000 at this point. Like, it's probably in the 1100s, including forms. The idea of balancing every Pokemon to have, to have a place in competitive, that idea, it's nothing but a fucking pipe dream. I'm sorry. If you believe that's even possible, I have a fucking, like, Swiss cheese submarine to sell you in my backyard. That is insanity. Like, and this also, like, and this was one of my major criticisms over Sword and Shield, and I think it didn't really help their point. Having Pokemon be kind of redundant. Like, okay, why introduce, the Pokemon Yamper and Boltund if you have Electrike and Manectric in there? Why introduce Cramorant if you have Wingull and Pelipper in there? Like, stuff like that to me, it's kind of like, why introduce these Pokemon if you're going to have the older Pokemon there? It's basically kind of redundancy, but the idea of, like, taking older ideas and implementing them in new ways into different Pokemon is something I can appreciate. I appreciate Cramorant's design. I appreciate Boltund and Yamper's design. Yamper is fucking adorable. But you kind of see the issue from, like, a bit of a game design standpoint, at least in my personal opinion. Like, some of these Pokemon feel kind of redundant. But that was back in Sword and Shield. I didn't see this in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But it's definitely something I found to be a bit of a glaring issue with Pokemon, at least in Sword and Shield.
Is how many Pokemon, will they limit them, and how will it all work, right? Like, if you think about the amount of Pokemon we have 1,000 Pokemon at this point, so the question becomes, will they be able to include all of them, and if not, then how many will they add every season or so? I mean,
if anything, I would say that they could add at the start a pretty good selection. I think Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's national, full Pokedex roster, it's almost 800, which is commendable. But we're also looking at, like, a single player experience kind of deal. So something like that it makes sense.
Think about Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go at this point has still not caught up all the way to the most recent games. I mean, it has in some parts, but they never release all the Pokemon. They take their sweet time to release bit by bit. And at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, but it does make it a little bit potentially unbalanced. Or they're going to have to definitely put out like constant balance patches to make sure that this game stays competitively viable and doesn't just
I don't care.
become a shitfest where only one Pokemon does everything. Which actually is a positive. The fact that we're going to be able to get balance patches more consistently, where you don't have to have Game Freak going in and making patches. Because remember, one of the reasons people complain and oftentimes have issues, especially with the mainline Pokemon games with VGC, is that we don't really get balance patches that often, right? Like, if one Pokemon is broken in one game, it stays broken in that game forever until you get to the next generation or the next game. Usually Pokemon that are broken in one game, they stay broken in that game because they don't tend to update Pokemon games. It has been more likely, like recently, there have been patches with Scarlet and Violet where they do change things up or they do nerf things, but oftentimes Game Freak doesn't like doing it. So having an entirely different studio doing it makes total sense because they can dedicate all their time to that. If this is a live service game, they have to constantly patch.
Okay, cannot be deposited in Pokemon Home. Okay.
They have to constantly add in new things. They have to constantly update it because people will not keep playing it. Because unlike Scarlet and Violet, this game is not going to have a story. It's just going to be about battling. That's the main feature. Which, speaking of, by the way, this game isn't made by Game Freak, or at least not to our knowledge. It's going to be worked on by the Pokemon Company and Pokemon Works. Now, if you do not know what Pokemon Works is, it is a brand new studio that was put together by the Pokemon Company and the company Ilka. Ilka are the people that created Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. You guys may know about them. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were games that, well, they were special. Some people like them, some people hate them. You say what you will, but basically Ilka created that game, and now they're the people mainly involved with creating Pokemon Champions. So, we get into the topic then. VGC replacement, right? That's what this is supposed to be. At least that's what it looks like from the outset. This game is only meant to exist to replace the existing VGC format and remove that part from the mainline games. And people like Wolfie Glick, like pros like that, have actually said that they would be totally fine with this. They would actually love it if Pokemon VGC was removed from the mainline games and all the official tournaments went over to Pokemon Champions, a dedicated game. Which, hey, if the pros are happy with it, then I guess we should all be happy with it, right? Well, yes and no. And for me, the yes and no mainly comes from the fact that you gotta remember, if they are splitting up the VGC and that stuff, that means that there's gonna be some sort of cost involved. And this is where the issue of live service comes in hand. Are we gonna be able to buy Pokemon Champions one time, and that's it?
You're not necessarily buying Pokemon Champions. Pokemon Champions is going to be free to play. So the idea of like cost monetization, there are ways to kind of deal with it. Like, we can't trade competitive. We can't put Pokemon with competitive items in Pokemon Home. Like they'll just like the items that you would supposedly have would just be like I think just put back in your bag. Which, at that point, like, you could basically buy items in Pokemon Champions for your competitive suit Pokemon. I think when you look at it like that, it makes a lot of sense to do the monetization of, like, competitive items. But, yeah, it's, definitely it's one of those deals like okay, my bad. But yeah, let's go back to it.
I doubt it. I think this game is going to function in strange ways, and this is where I get worried that potentially they might force us in one shape and or form to pay a monthly subscription of sorts And if not a monthly subscription, then maybe potentially adding in microtransactions for anything like transferring Pokemon, buying Pokemon, whatever else you want to call it. I'm afraid they might implement some really bad monetization practices into this game because of the way it's shaped. Because it's not going to be part of the mainline games anymore. I mean, I'm certain they're going to use Pokemon Home to transfer games for the next generation. So imagine, like, you got Gen 10, you transfer Pokemon from Gen 10 into Pokemon Champions, but that's probably going to be limited to some extent. And then what do you do if certain Pokemon don't exist in Generation 10 and you can't transfer them? What do you do then? Well, maybe you buy them, maybe you pay for them. Again, we don't really know. The game is still in early days. It's coming out next.
I think in this sense, like, something like that would be rather irritating. But, like, if they were to do different formats, so to say, like legacy formats or something like that, I think would be a really good way to kind of like rotate formats and shit. I think could be a good way to deal with it. And like say, to enter into official competitions, like you pay a certain amount of cash, and then like, you know, you can play from anywhere. You know, like you're still in that competition no matter where you are. As long as you have an internet connection, you can play against other people in whatever competition. I think that would actually be pretty cool.
Next year in 2026, so there's still time for them to kind of mull it out and figure things out. I mean, it does break the link between mainline single-player experiences and the competitive Pokemon. It totally breaks and separates that part of the franchise. Again, is this a positive or a negative? Well, I think it's a positive in many ways. Why? Well, obviously because now the mainline Pokemon single-player games, they don't have to care about balancing. You don't have to balance Pokemon Generation 10.
This, I think, is a little bit wrong. They're still going to have to care about balancing in the fact of, like, within the game. But in terms of, like, a competitive aspect, not quite so. They'd still have to do it at least a bit because of the fact that, like, the Pokemon would be the Pokemon Gen 10 would be transferable, at least after a bit, into Pokemon Champions and Pokemon Home. So that idea, it makes sense to still be balanced to a degree.
At all. Like, you don't have to think about, like, oh, will this be a good thing to have in the game because of balancing? Will including this brand new feature, will this cause an imbalance for VGC in 2026 and 27 and beyond? No, you don't have to care about that. You can add in really cool features, really cool Pokemon, really cool IDs that will not impact the competitive scene because the competitive scene will be in a different place, which is totally fine. That's actually awesome. But it does mean that it removes an entire section of a Pokemon mainline game. So think about this. Video games are now going up in price. We're about to be paying $80 for games, right? Like, Nintendo has officially done it. They've now raised the prices, and because Nintendo raised the prices, so did Xbox and so did PlayStation.
Actually, the first to raise their prices, as far as I'm aware, it was PlayStation. They just didn't make as big of a jump as Nintendo did, where PlayStation's like it's up to like $70. Nintendo's like, nah, bitch, we going 80. So, if anything, it's kind of PlayStation's fault.
Games have gone up drastically in price. Now, if you think about it, if Generation 10 Pokemon comes out next year, and they want you to pay $80 for a Pokemon game. Just think about that. You're about to pay for a game that no longer has the actual competitive aspect. The Wi-Fi battling will be gone, right? It will not be part of it anymore. I mean, it still could be. They could do what they did for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee actually included Wi-Fi battling, but it was just kind of, meh, right? Like, it wasn't super important. It was just kind of there. It existed, but not many people really used it. And the main reason they didn't use it was because they officially announced that, hey, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee's, competitive scene is not going to be anything related to the, to the actual competitive scene. It's not going to be related to VGC. It's not going to be included in the VGC.
I think instead of competitive, what they could do is the cooperative stuff that they've been doing for the past 2 generations, raids. Like, that to me, like, there's still a team building aspect, but it's not just, your own team. It's you working with other players, you coordinating with other players in order to get a common goal done. Like, in order to achieve a common goal. Like, it's one of the things that I find so fascinating about the raids. And not just that, like, there's still an aspect of that team building there. It's just it's just a different way of implementing that team building aspect. And I think it was absolutely brilliant.
Tournament, it's just like a side feature. And this is the most important thing. I just want them to make sure that actual Wi-Fi battling will still be present in this game. Like in Generation 10, be still present and not be removed fully so that people can still battle their friends. Like, that's the most important thing. The worst thing they can do is, and this is why I'm making this video, is the fear that they could take this feature, the battling with your friends, or battling with people online, on Wi-Fi connection, whatever, and fully remove it. And tell you, hey, if you want to battle people, I don't know, transfer your Pokemon to Champions and go play Champions. Because if they did that, then that's a dick move, and I personally don't think that's even going to motivate me to want to play Pokemon Champions. Because then
Well... Okay. The thing that this guy is forgetting is that Pokemon Champions is more than likely going to be free to play. So you could just download it and there you go. Yeah, it's possible that items aren't going to be free, but I'm okay with that. Like, I think many of us are okay with that.
you've taken an entire feature from the Pokemon franchise, deleted it from existence, a feature that a lot of people do enjoy and care for. People do still battle their friends for fun. People do still do that. Like, we have tournaments sometimes on our Discord server where people will jump in and battle each other and things along that nature. Like, this is a staple of Pokemon, especially the mainline Pokemon games, and suddenly removing it would be kind of insane. It would be really shitty, and then you charge us $80 potentially. Again, there's no guarantees that Pokemon's going to cost $80, but come on, let's be honest. Obviously it is. They raised the price of every other game. You think they're not going to raise Pokemon too? But okay, I've been shitting too much on Champions here. No, I actually think Champions is great. It's going to reduce the likeliness of people cheating. It's going to reduce the likeliness of issues. It's going to essentially make it easier for Game Freak to spend more time on their games and not focus on balancing and things along that nature. That can be left to an entirely different studio. They don't have to think about that. That's going to be totally out of their hands now, which is good, but again, they got to make sure they still keep battling with your friends as a part of the game. If they remove that, that's a big part of Pokemon that's gone, and then if all they can tell you is, hey, go play Pokemon Champions, that's another cost. If you're already going to pay $70 to $80 for a Pokemon game, and then on top of that, potentially a subscription, or a buy-in price, or whatever else it's going to cost for Pokemon Champions, that would be ridiculous, which is why I'm hoping that Pokemon Champions is going to be free to play. I haven't seen anything about it. If it is the true, I haven't seen it on the website. They haven't mentioned it anywhere. I don't really know. It hasn't been brought up by anyone. But if it is free to play, then great. Then it's not an issue. However, if they do make you pay for it, or if they do make it a subscription of sorts, then it becomes a little bit more iffy. Because then it's like, okay, I mean, I want to competitively battle, and I used to be able to competitively battle on my regular purchased game, but now it's on a separate platform and a separate game totally that I also have to pay for. It's just double dipping on the Pokemon franchise. And so how can they monetize this game? Well, there's obviously a few different ways. The first one likely would be the case that if the game is free to play, which is highly chance here, like there's a big chance it's going to be free to play, then how can they make money? Well, the first one is battle passes. This is what every game does nowadays. Marvel Rivals added it too. Every game does it. It is just the standard way of monetizing. That means cosmetics, so skins and items and things along that.
Yeah, I don't really see that as a big problem because Pokemon is very tactical. Like, you could turn there's the fear method. Like, for those who aren't into competitive Pokemon, here is what fear is. Fear is basically using a level 1 Pokemon. Typically, it's either Rattata or Aeron. Aeron is typically the better choice because it has the ability Sturdy. So it's always going to survive from max HP. It's always going to survive one hit. It also has Endeavor. Endeavor basically has it to where you reduce the opponent's Pokemon's HP to the same HP of like whatever Pokemon is using it. So like, and the thing is, this is always going to survive with at least 1 HP. That Pokemon is going to be left with 1 HP. And then you hit it with a quick attack, so it gains priority. That Pokemon's 1 HP, gone. Pokemon faints. And then you typically have the reason why Aeron is better is it doesn't take an item in order for it to survive like Rattata does. Rattata does it by takes the item slot because of the fact it has to carry Focus Sash to do it. Aeron has the ability Sturdy, so it doesn't need that Focus Sash. Instead, it has something to recover that lost HP. And typically people will have it carry a Shell Bell, which basically damage dealt to a Pokemon is healed. So it's right back at full HP. But yeah, like, and the thing is, like, you can use this to take down absolute, like, monsters in competitive scene, as long as they're not ghost type, more or less. But Pokemon has always had those quirks, and has had the big kind of the complexity of chess. If anything, it's actually more complex than chess, and it's something like it's one of the reasons why Pokemon, in terms of the competitive scene, is so amazing to watch. Because there are so many different moves, so many different strategies. I don't quite think that Wi-Fi battling would be out, but it would definitely be changed. And especially if the combat system is changed, which I think might be the case in Pokemon Generation 10. Possibly.
Nature would probably be the way they monetize the game. However, the biggest fear would be pay to win. If they went down this path, this would ruin Pokemon, in my opinion. This would be the worst thing they could have
I don't think it's going to be pay to win.
Ever done for Pokemon. If they make it pay to win, if you are able to purchase Pokemon, that's it. Like, Pokemon is shit at that point. Because being able to buy Pokemon would be ridiculous. Pokemon...
To a degree, I understand where he's coming from. At the same, I mean, it would completely fucking eliminate things like PK Hex and all that. Well, actually, no, because PK Hex is free, but we're not getting into that. Like, that would also go into talking about, like, the ethics of, like, hacking in Pokemon. My personal stance is, like, I don't completely find it unethical, but it does cheapen the reward of like training your Pokemon to meet these very specific standards of like what you need in your team. I think it kind of cheapens that, yes, but I don't think it's like entirely unethical, so to say. I like cheating is about getting an unfair advantage. That's not really the case here. I don't find it getting an unfair advantage. Like, if it's within the confines of the game itself, no, I don't think it's unfair. I think it's kind of cheap. I think it's cheap, but I'm not going to hate on people who do it. And people play play Pokemon differently all the time. People do, like, Nuzlockes and stuff like that. And I have no qualms against any of them, so.
It's always been about, like, raising your own team and putting in the work and effort. And, hey, if you don't like putting in the work and effort, if you're just doing, like, let's say a challenge run, people use PK Hex, okay? And that's free. But if you have to start paying for Pokemon, I think that's ridiculous. And there are people out...
And also, at the same time, I can understand, like, paying for, like, say, event Pokemon. Every now and then, Pokemon will do events in which, like, you can get a certain Pokemon. They usually do this, like, once a year, celebrating, like, the Pokemon World Championships, and they'll celebrate the, person who won the World Championships by introducing a copy of, his ace Pokemon, so to say. You can get that Pokemon for free, but the thing is, that's also at a limited window. Having, like, and especially, like, say, mythical Pokemon, where, like, you can get these, new, introduce these new Pokemon, like, where you can go and get, say, Jirachi, okay? I don't think that I don't think that we've ever really had a Jirachi event, except for maybe, like, once or twice, as far as I'm aware. And you didn't have to pay for it, but it was only for a very limited time, and if you weren't able to get it during that limited time, you're kind of fucked out of getting a Jirachi, so to say. Stuff like that. I would like to see, like, what they did with, like, during the 6th generation, introducing to the 7th generation, like, for a whole year, I think this was for the 20th anniversary, like, they would have you be able to get a mythical Pokemon, and it was, like, every month the mythical Pokemon was different, but for that entire month, you were still able to get it. That, to me, was great. Like, I remember getting at least a few different mythicals. Like, I got Mew, Celebi, Manaphy, and stuff like that. Like, that to me was really cool. I would love to see something like that happen again. But at the same time, like, if they were to have it to where the window was, like, indefinite, but you had to pay for it, I mean, you were already paying, like, if you were going to a different location, like, you were already paying for the resources to go to said location, so there was already kind of a paywall there, but now that paywall isn't necessarily based off of where you are, it's just at any point in time, you can just get these Pokemon if you have the money for them, and they're there. The one thing, though, that kind of fucking kills me is right at the start, it says that Pokemon obtained in Pokemon Champions are not transferable into Pokemon Home or, whatever mainline games. I think that kind of kills it, But at the same time, if this is going to be the main battle place, kind of makes sense. To not really have them be transferable, because, I mean, if you're just getting them to battle, guess what? There you go. You don't have to transfer them. But yeah, that there is it is one deal. I wouldn't necessarily mind paying to get certain Pokemon, and especially, like, you could have it to where they're free for a limited time, and then you pay for them after that limited time expires. I think that would be okay.
There who do buy like hacked Pokemon, which I think is ridiculous, but again, to each their own. But I think if this is an official thing, if they start charging people for Pokemon, that'll be the worst thing they could possibly do. So I really hope that at least that doesn't change, that at least like the game is gonna,
yeah, which is why I say just add a grace period where they're free.
Is free to play, that they won't charge you for Pokemon themselves, but will only charge you for like battle passes and bonuses and shots, you know, side stuff.
Oh yeah, I like the song.
Mostly, you know, custom trainer outfits, custom outfits for your Pokemon, special arena designs, things along that nature. The Pokemon Unite, for example, like something like that nature, but without being able to buy the Pokemon you want to use, essentially. So, here are some of the community concerns that could happen with this game. Live service fatigue. Yes, people are a little bit sick of live service games. I'm sick of live service games. I prefer playing single-player games now. I spend more of my time playing Dark Souls and things along that nature than I do playing games like Valorant, which I used to spend hours upon hours upon hours inside of. I prefer single-player games. I prefer just being to myself, enjoying a game for what it is, and being done with it. It's really tiresome having to keep up with the constant updates, constant meta shifts. And again, there are people who are into that, and I think Pokemon can do that really well. And that's fine, but I do think a lot of people have a little bit of that live service fatigue. There's too many games to keep up with. The second issue, it might fragment the community. We might get a massive shift and like sort of split that will happen between the people who play competitive and the people who play mainline. It might split up the community again, which it already has happened many times. The Pokemon Go community is different from the mainline community, who's different from, you know, the Showdown community, which is different from the VGC community. It might just make another drift sort of in fan bases, which I don't know if, again, it's a positive or a negative, I don't really know. And I think the biggest one is, what if Pokemon Champions dies? Like, what if the game launches and then fails eventually? Let's say 5 years down the line, this game...
I don't think it's gonna fail. Like, Pokemon Go, while it's not the size it was at the beginning of its lifespan. Like, Pokemon Go legitimately, like, became a fucking it was a second wind. It was a massive phenomenon when it first came out. I don't expect this to be that big, but I can see it kind of creating a bit of a second win for Pokemon, and not just that, by splitting the two aspects of Pokemon, by splitting the two personas. We now have it to where the persona that's been the weakest part of it is now able to flourish without having to sacrifice the other. And like when I said at the beginning of this video, like, that's a really, really good deal. Like, now Pokemon doesn't have to really limit itself as, you know, as an RPG. And I think seeing it from that from that perspective, they're able to also completely change the gameplay of Pokemon by doing this. We could have, you know, the combat mechanics of Legends ZA. We could have the combat mechanics of Pokemon Legends Arceus. We could have the capture mechanics of them. Like, that to me is awesome. You know, completely changing from a turn-based system to somewhat more of a hybrid system is, to me, like, yes, the impact, like, a lot of us are looking at Pokemon Champions like, this is going to change the fucking game. This is going to change the franchise in really big ways. And I think, like, a lot of us looking at it like that, whether positive or negative, but we're still looking at the potential impact that this has, like, we're kind of correct. But either way, we're all kind of honed in on, like, the potential impact of this. So, yeah.
Doesn't really work out anymore, and it gets fully, like, shut down, then what? What happens to all the stuff you put in? What happens to all the money you've spent? What happens to all the Pokemon you've collected? What happens to all of that? Would it just be deleted? Would they bring back VGC to the mainline games? Like, what actually happens to all the time and investment you put in? Like, what happens to that? That's the question. What do you do then? Also, doing this, again, signals that potentially down the line, Pokemon mainline games are going to get less and less important, right? Like, Pokemon mainline games have been the mainline games and been so important because of the fact that they are the games that are basically only allowed to introduce brand new Pokemon.
I disagree with this. If you're, like, this is kind of looking only at one aspect of Pokemon, but there's a lot of different aspects. My friend / neighbor and I were, we talk about, like, past Pokemon games. Like, we all have that one Pokemon game that, like, truly fucking truly shined for us. Mine, like, the first Pokemon game that I bought using my own money, and it is a game that I hold dearly because I consider, like, and to me it was the best generation in terms of story, Pokemon Black and White. I'm sorry if you fucking disagree with this, but I consider Pokemon Black and White to be the absolute peak whenever it comes to story. It was fucking phenomenal. And absolutely amazing character. And I want something like that. I want that epic, I want that awesome storytelling again. We don't quite get that in modern Pokemon games. I mean, we do get great characters, yes, but story they have been rather lacking in. And I have criticisms for the settings, in terms of exploration, I think Pokemon Sword and Shield were rather lackluster. In terms of, just kind of like how, like, and it was, like, from the way that they've shown, it was mainly due to technological constraints. Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet were rather barren. And that, to me, is a glaring issue. I play a lot of Pokemon games. I like the story. I love... And I do like the competitive aspect. Don't get me wrong. I haven't played Pokemon in a while, but that competitive aspect is always there. But having them focus more on story and, really try and go for engaging gameplay that's not the same as turn-based is something that I think could be a really good positive for the franchise. We've started to see franchises go more for this kind of action kind of deal. It's more real-time, skill-based aspect rather than, the tactical aspect of it. And Pokemon has always been more, much more on the tactical aspect rather than the skill aspect. And seeing them go more for that skill aspect with Pokemon Legends ZA is something that I find to be also refreshing. But out of the way. Let's
They're the only games that are allowed to have the, regular VGC competitive thingy to them. Like, this has all been consolidated into the mainline games, but now suddenly this might make them less important, which, again, could be...
They're not going to be less important. Like, there's no fucking way. The idea that this will just make these games less important is kind of laughable. And not even just that, but in order to get the new Pokemon, you would have to get the new game and transfer them into Pokemon Champions, and there you go.
Positive could be negative, but the mainline games need to improve, not get worse, which I don't think this necessarily means that, but it's always a possibility. And also, since Pokemon Champions is probably going to be the game that's going to have a lot of patches and balance updates and stuff, what if in Pokemon, like, Generation 10, if we have, let's say, a really broken Pokemon or mechanic, will that never get updated? We don't care about that anymore because those games are single player. Like, will that just leave certain stuff broken fully? Because, hey, you can go and play it in Champions and there it does work properly. Again, it's a lot of fears about what will happen to the single player experience, if they remove the competitive experience, because they sort of balance each other in the mainline games. But I don't really know. Again, it's all just questions I'm asking, and I'm hoping everything turns out great. So, the question, of course, is what will this mean for Gen 10? This is the biggest question I have. First of all, like I already said, Gen 10 might not have VGC support because of Champions. But that means that Gen 10 could focus far more on making a really good story and telling a really good plot, right? They can do a really good job.
Safe flight prepared.
Perfecting your swing is hard.
Nice shot, Dad. Safe flight replaced.
But replacing your windshield doesn't have to be. Get it fixed now and pay later.
Yeah.
Payment options only at safelight.com.
Take what you do best and create a website that's worthy of it.
Making the mainline Pokemon Generation 10 game much, much better. Now, some people might love the way Champions is going to work. Having that split...
I'm actually one of those. Like, I want them to focus more on story and world building. And it seems to me like Pokemon, as of recent, have been kind of doing this kind of, like, what they're trying to do is interconnect it. Trying to form more of a cohesive world. By having, like, references from past games and whatnot, and doing, like, the regional forums and all that, like the idea of, like, Pokemon, migration and whatnot, from the, there are people who make videos on the ecology of Pokemon. I'm actually subscribed to one of them. But stuff like that is something I find so fascinating if we don't talk about nearly often enough. Like, I have said before in at least a couple of my videos, Pokemon has the potential to reach world-building peaks like Tolkien. And, like, just the wildlife is so fucking insane. Like, that potential, and I really do want to see them strive for that potential, because it would make it like the greatest, most fleshed out world ever. At least in my personal opinion. It would be something insane.
Split between single player and multiplayer, having a split between competitive and just story-based content, that may be fine, but to some people it's going to remove the whole feeling of, like, collecting, catching, and raising your own team. Like, actually creating an...
This I disagree with, because we don't know, and I doubt that they're going to be putting a kind of trainer deal, but yeah, I don't think they're gonna have, like, training stuff in Pokemon Champions. I don't think that's going to happen. If anything, it's probably only going to be like items, like cosmetic stuff. I can completely understand that. But the idea of like rare candies and shit, like, nah, I don't see them doing that, because it would just kind of destroy like the progression of another game. Like that's insane. Like, I'm a mere layman whenever it comes to like game design, but even I can tell you like that would be a monumentously stupid fucking idea. And Game Freak is here. Well, this isn't by Game Freak, but by people who actually develop games. Like, they're a lot smarter than me. They probably already know. Like, yeah, that would be a stupid fucking idea.
You take into battle. And again, you can make the reasoning that, hey, you can still transfer them. You can still transfer them into Pokemon Champions, which, yes, but it just isn't really the same, is it? It's going to feel different. It's not going to have the same impact, in my opinion, that doing it the other way around would have. So, that's basically my general gist and feelings on this. I think Pokemon Champions is going to be potentially a sick game. The fact that mainline Pokemon games may not have to necessarily spend as much time balancing things and just focus on making an epic freaking game and journey, spend more time making cool designs than thinking about how to balance those designs, that would be awesome. That actually would work really, really well. That would be so much fun. But that's if they do it right. That's if Pokemon Champions isn't like ridiculously pricey or has a monthly subscription or does things that are just bad for Pokemon. And also, as long as the game sticks around, because if Champions dies, so does the competitive side of Pokemon permanently, because it's doubtful that they bring it back in other games. And of course, the main thing for me is still keep Wi-Fi battling in the games. Like, don't have to balance it, and it doesn't have to be part of VGC anymore, but just keep it in the game, just like in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, right? It's like, just keep it in there to make sure people can still enjoy it. And of course, get the monetization right. Make sure the monetization is fair. I don't mind battle passes if they make sense, and as long as you do not have to purchase Pokemon individually, because that would be ridiculous. But yeah, right now we just have to wait. The launch date is still to be decided, so we'll see.
Yeah, I am...
See how everything turns out. But the game is going to come out next year most likely, and it's going to be a release alongside Generation 10, because Generation 10 Pokemon is coming out next year, so we'll see how it turns out. But I'm excited. I want to know your thoughts and opinions. Do you think this game is going to work out well, or do you think some of those worries are maybe too worrying? Let me know in the comment section, and thank you all for watching.
With smart security and energy management, Vivid makes your home smarter, all in one place.
Welcome to yours. All the awesomeness of a roguelite for you and your friends and goblins.
But yeah, that was basically kind of like my take, replying to Ruffeled Rowlit. If you haven't subscribed to him, go subscribe to him. But yeah, I think that this is going to be something that a lot of us are... Like, a lot of us are looking at the potential impact of this, and we're like... You know, like, there is a chance that it could be a fucking... Like, they could just completely shit the bed and just absolutely wreck their shit in the long run. But I'm not a person of faith, but I hope that they can look at it and be like, okay, let's look at all these different avenues of how this can go. Let's try and pick the best one. Let's look at the, decision costs here. Let's see what we can do to deliver the best experience. And I think that's kind of what they've been doing. I think that if anything, it'll lead to a good deal. It's kind of like, Sleep Token, like, a lot of their songs are like about this kind of toxic relationship, and that's kind of what's been happening within Pokemon for a while. The competitive scene has been kind of like a bit of a toxic romance with the core of the games, and it's like it's not like a super bad romance, but it's still like there's some toxic elements that kind of need to be parsed out, and separating for a time is not it's going to do them both good. If Pokemon really improves in its writing, its world building, and introduces entirely new combat mechanics, I'll be okay with that. I'll be like, you know what, that separation, like, we get something like Pokemon Legends ZA's combat system in the mainline game, I'll be like, okay, you know what? Separation is good. This is a amicable divorce. I'm okay with it. And now, instead of just one Christmas, we get two. Okay. It's not nearly as bad a divorce as fucking Elon Musk and Donald Trump at this point, okay? I'm fine with that. This is going to be the complete opposite of that divorce. Cool. But yeah, so that's my thoughts. If you want to discuss, disagree here, say what you want down in the fucking comment, doodly, whatever. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. Anyway, everyone, be kind to one another, stay based.